The muzzle flash briefly illuminated the darkness, lasting just long enough for Master Chief Derek Vance to observe the enemy machine gunner's head jerk backward as his body collapsed behind the sandbag fortification located 847 meters distant. Using his night vision equipment, Vance witnessed the fighter's two fellow soldiers responding with bewilderment, leaning over their deceased companion, entirely oblivious that death was already targeting them through a thermal optic. Two additional muted cracks resonated through the mountain ravine, and two more bodies fell. Vance whispered into his communication device with confusion, observing enemy strongholds descending into pandemonium as combatants who had been confidently maintaining their defensive posts suddenly began perishing from an unseen danger. He questioned who was firing. A composed, professional voice responded through his earpiece, displaying none of the adrenaline rush that typically accompanies neutralizing multiple adversaries in complete darkness, identifying herself and indicating she was engaging the second position. Vance redirected his optics toward the second defensive emplacement, witnessing 4 more hostile fighters dropping in quick succession. The sequence involved bolt manipulation, sight alignment, and trigger engagement, resulting in 4 eliminations in roughly 6 seconds. This scenario seemed implausible. A single marksman, operating in absolute darkness at distances approaching 1,000 meters, was eliminating targets as if operating with supernatural advantages. He called out for Douglas, inquiring about her status while she announced engagement of the third position. Another suppressed volley occurred, though Vance remained unable to determine its origin point. 3 additional thermal readings disappeared from his display. The voice advised him to begin advancing, noting approximately 45 seconds remained before occupants of the compound would recognize that all defensive stations had gone silent. 23 Navy SEALs remained hidden within the rocky terrain 300 meters from a reinforced hostile compound, each one a seasoned combatant with extensive operational experience. Every single operator stared with astonishment at their night vision displays, observing the seemingly impossible scenario developing in real time. 7 fortified defensive stations, more than 30 enemy combatants, and interlocking firing sectors specifically designed to establish a kill zone that no assault element could penetrate represented the type of fortifications that had previously repelled 2 American offensive operations, resulting in 8 fatalities and substantial equipment damage. Yet someone identified as Douglas was systematically eliminating them all with the ease of a training drill. She announced engagement of the 4th position, with more casualties accumulating, followed by the 5th position as enemy fighters began panicking, discharging weapons randomly into the darkness, their muzzle flashes exposing their locations before Douglas's projectiles located them. She reported simultaneous engagement of positions 6 and 7, then confirmed all positions neutralized and clearance for the Master Chief to proceed, suggesting rapid movement as the compound was becoming alert. Vance realized his jaw had dropped open and quickly closed it, keying his radio to order his team forward to the designated phase line while requesting Douglas maintain surveillance and assuring him she possessed adequate ammunition. She confirmed sufficient ammunition though joked about potentially exhausting targets if they delayed, noting the compound was awakening. As the SEAL element emerged from concealment and initiated their rapid assault approach, Vance found himself consumed by a singular burning inquiry that would need to wait until mission completion. Who exactly was Douglas, and how had Admiral Harrington located someone capable of what they had just witnessed? 12 hours previously, when a young female lieutenant had entered their briefing facility and Admiral Harrington announced she would single-handedly eliminate all 7 defensive positions, Vance had been convinced they were about to perish in a suicidal operation led by some Pentagon administrators in proven concept. He had been profoundly mistaken, though there was nothing amusing about observing 38 hostile fighters eliminated in under 2 minutes by a marksman whose position he still couldn't identify despite years of training to detect snipers. Douglas's voice came through again, reporting 4 fighters attempting to outflank their left side and announcing engagement. 4 more muzzle flashes appeared in the darkness, 4 more bodies struck the ground before they could endanger his team. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb transmitted breathlessly over the radio during their sprint toward the compound, expressing his ignorance regarding Douglas's identity but his intention to purchase drinks upon their return, to which Vance responded that Webb would need to wait in line as he was planning adoption. They breached the compound's perimeter wall, with explosives demolishing the gate and flashbangs detonating in blinding sequences of light and sound. The assault had commenced, and it would become a savage close-quarters engagement where SEAL training and experience would dictate survival outcomes. However, the impossible component, where one individual neutralized an entire defensive network designed to resist battalion-sized assaults, had already been accomplished. The 23 Navy SEALs charging through that entrance understood with absolute certainty that when this concluded, they would owe their survival to someone they had never encountered, never learned about, and until 12 hours prior never believed could conceivably exist. Admiral Harrington had provided them with a miracle contained within a rifle scope, named Lieutenant Marley Douglas, and she was about to demonstrate that sometimes the most lethal individual on a battlefield is the one nobody anticipates. However, 12 hours earlier, nobody in that briefing facility believed any of this was achievable. The briefing facility carried the odor of stale coffee, perspiration, and the distinctive tension accompanying the planning of operations where casualties were probable. Lieutenant Marley Douglas occupied a rear row seat, her presence minimally acknowledged by the 23 Navy SEALs occupying the remaining space. At 26 years of age, she was younger than most, smaller than all, and according to personnel documentation, she was present as an intelligence liaison meant to brief operators on enemy locations then remained safely distant while they executed actual operations. The SEALs were unaware that Marley Douglas possessed secrets, actually several. Admiral James Harrington stood at the facility's front, a man approaching 60 whose weathered features and silver hair conveyed the authority of 3 decades leading special operations. Behind him, a large tactical display showed the target compound, a collection of structures in the northern Syrian mountains where high-value individuals were believed to be conducting meetings with foreign weapons suppliers. Harrington initiated the briefing, his voice carrying the roughness of excessive years shouting over helicopter rotor noise, explaining this was a capture or elimination operation with Hassan al-Kuwaiti as the primary objective, a suspected explosives manufacturer responsible for attacks on coalition personnel across 3 nations, with secondary objectives including any foreign individuals providing material assistance and intelligence collection from the compound's communications facility. He manipulated a remote control and the display changed to present aerial reconnaissance imagery, describing the compound as constructed into the mountainside with 3 primary structures, multiple defensive locations, and an estimated 30 to 40 combatants on site equipped with night vision and heavy weaponry, anticipating their arrival, noting previous reconnaissance efforts had been detected and repelled. Master Chief Petty Officer Derek Vance inquired about their approach vector from his front row position. Harrington explained helicopter insertion 3 kilometers distant followed by foot approach using a specific ridgeline, identifying the problem as 7 defensive emplacement positions with overlapping firing sectors, machine gun installations, likely crew-served weapons, and positions hardened against aerial bombardment that controlled the only viable approach to the compound. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb questioned whether they could neutralize them with precision strikes before insertion, to which Harrington responded negatively, explaining the need for surprise and that any aerial strikes would alert the entire region, causing targets to disperse before they could secure them. Harrington's expression was severe as he noted those 7 positions required silent and simultaneous neutralization, warning that if even one opened fire, the entire operation would be compromised. The facility fell quiet as everyone present comprehended the mathematics. 7 fortified positions, more than 30 fighters, nocturnal operation, total surprise required. It represented the type of mission that appeared straightforward in planning but transformed into catastrophe during execution. Vance spoke carefully with respect, noting that simultaneous silent elimination of 7 defensive positions wasn't realistic, requiring a full sniper element, and even then, he was interrupted by Harrington acknowledging the challenge, which was why he was introducing additional assets. He turned toward the facility's rear, calling Lieutenant Douglas forward. Marley stood smoothly with economical, precise movements and walked to the front. She measured 5 feet 7 inches with an athletic build and dark hair secured in a regulation bun, her appearance not suggesting a door kicker or operator but exactly what her personnel documentation indicated, an intelligence officer with a graduate degree in Middle Eastern studies. The SEALs observed her with expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. Harrington announced Lieutenant Douglas would accompany their team on this operation, prompting Vance's face to display carefully controlled confusion as he expressed appreciation for intelligence support but noted this was a direct action mission, pausing to choose words carefully regarding having non-combat personnel on target potentially complicating matters. Harrington clarified that Lieutenant Douglas wasn't present for intelligence support but to resolve their 7-position problem, deepening the confusion. Webb spoke up, expressing his lack of understanding regarding how one person could neutralize 7 fortified defensive positions regardless of their military occupational specialty. Harrington's expression remained unchanged as he instructed the lieutenant to display her qualification scores. Marley approached the computer console and accessed a file, filling the screen with shooting qualification records. The SEALs leaned forward reading the numbers, and their confusion transformed into disbelief. Sniper qualification expert, long-range precision with 98.7% hit rate at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters, low-light operations qualified, night vision operations qualified, stress course scores exceeding every benchmark in the database. Someone muttered from the middle of the room that this had to be an error. Harrington stated flatly it wasn't an error, explaining Lieutenant Douglas held the current Marine Corps record for long-range precision shooting, had completed advanced sniper training at 3 different institutions, was qualified on more weapon systems than anyone present including himself, and would eliminate all 7 defensive positions before they even reached the compound perimeter. The facility erupted into barely controlled objection, with voices overlapping expressing variations of the same sentiment: impossible, unrealistic, too dangerous, untested in combat. Harrington allowed them to speak for exactly 10 seconds before his voice cut through the noise like a blade, ordering them to be silent and listen. The facility went quiet as he expressed understanding of their skepticism, noting he would be concerned if they weren't skeptical, but explaining Lieutenant Douglas wasn't some desk administrator with good range scores but had been operating in classified capacities for the past 3 years, the reason they had never heard of her being because her work required absolute discretion, and the reason she was present now being because this mission couldn't succeed without her capabilities. He turned to Marley, instructing her to explain her plan. Marley's voice was calm and professional, carrying none of the defensiveness the SEALs might have anticipated. She described 7 positions with maximum separation of 200 meters between emplacement locations, explaining she would establish a concealment site on a specific ridge providing an elevated firing position with clear sight lines to all 7 locations, with ranges between 600 and 900 meters depending on the target. Webb pointed out this would be in total darkness, questioning whether night vision wouldn't compromise her position with infrared signature. She confirmed correct, explaining she would utilize thermal optics for target identification and acquisition, noting enemy positions would appear clearly against cold mountain rock, and she would engage from longest to shortest range with 7 shots and elimination time under 90 seconds for all positions. Vance's voice carried open disbelief as he questioned 90 seconds for 7 targets at varying ranges in total darkness with the accuracy required for instant kills so they couldn't raise an alarm, stating that wasn't possible. Marley met his eyes steadily, explaining it wasn't only possible but was the easy part, with the hard part being getting into position without detection, maintaining absolute noise discipline, and timing the shot so his team could capitalize on the brief window before the enemy realized what was happening. Vance challenged what would occur if she missed, if even one position survived an open fire. She responded that she didn't miss, the statement not being arrogance but fact delivered with the same tone someone might use to state water is wet or gravity exists. Admiral Harrington stepped forward, explaining to the Master Chief he wasn't requesting approval and this was how the operation would proceed, with Lieutenant Douglas inserting with his team, establishing her concealment site, and eliminating the defensive positions on his signal, after which his team would proceed with the primary mission while she provided surveillance. He asked for questions. Vance clearly had numerous questions but also understood the chain of command, responding negatively that they would make it work. Harrington confirmed good, stating the operation launched at 2,200 hours, giving Lieutenant Douglas 6 hours to prepare equipment and coordinate with the team before dismissing them. The SEALs filed out of the facility, most throwing skeptical glances at Marley as they passed, which she ignored, instead approaching the tactical display to study the terrain in more detail. Harrington waited until they were alone, noting they didn't believe she could accomplish it. She acknowledged knowing this and he asked if she was confident. Marley studied the display for another moment, calculating angles and distances mentally, 7 static positions, predictable firing sectors, targets believing they were safely hidden. She confirmed yes, she was confident. Harrington stated good, because if this went wrong, many good personnel would perish, pausing to add her career would conclude before anyone outside the facility ever knew she existed. She responded with understanding. Harrington studied her momentarily, explaining that when he first read her file 3 years ago, he thought it was fiction, noting nobody shoots that well or has that kind of natural talent combined with that level of training, but then he saw a video from her qualification course and realized they had something unique, someone who could do things that shouldn't be possible. She attributed it to training and genetics, noting her father was a competitive shooter and her mother was a physicist, explaining she understood ballistics at an intuitive level most people didn't. He agreed it was more than that, noting she had something that couldn't be taught, gesturing at the display while questioning whether talent meant much if she froze when people started shooting back, asking if she had ever been under fire. Marley's expression didn't change as she responded 3 times in classified operations not appearing in her official record, explaining she performed as expected and if things went sideways tonight, she would adapt and complete the mission. Harrington nodded slowly, expressing belief in her, then instructed her to go make the SEALs believe it too, and the story continued with detailed preparations, the actual operation, and the aftermath demonstrating her extraordinary capabilities and subsequent assignments.